My name is Leslie. I'm 52, and I've learned that sometimes protecting what matters most means keeping secrets from those you love most. 3 years ago, my husband Robert passed away, leaving behind his workshop in our basement. That sacred space holds more than tools and memories. It contains the key to our family's future. When my son Marcus married a woman who saw dollar signs instead of love, I knew trouble was coming. I installed a new code lock and waited. Then came that terrifying phone call during my Arizona trip, and I realized everything I'd feared was about to unfold exactly as I'd predicted. Before we dive into this story that changed everything between a mother and son, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button if you've ever had to make tough decisions to protect your family. And don't forget to subscribe, because what happened next will show you why sometimes a mother's greatest act of love looks like betrayal. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. I never thought I'd become the kind of mother who questions her own son's motives. But life has a way of teaching us lessons we never wanted to learn. After Robert died suddenly of a heart attack 3 years ago, I found myself alone in the house where we'd built 30 years of memories together. The basement had always been his domain, his workshop, where he restored antique furniture and crafted beautiful pieces from rare wood he'd collected over decades. Robert wasn't just handy with tools. He was a master craftsman whose work was sought after by collectors and museums. That basement contained thousands of dollars worth of specialized restoration equipment, hand tools that belonged in a museum themselves, and a collection of exotic woods that would make any craftsman weep with envy. But more importantly, hidden behind a false panel Robert had built himself was a safe containing our emergency fund. $250,000 from his life insurance policy that he'd specifically instructed me to keep for true emergencies. Marcus had always respected the basement rule. Even as a curious child, he understood that Dad's workshop was sacred space. He'd sit on the steps and watch Robert work, learning about wood grain and the patience required for true craftsmanship. My son grew up to be everything Robert and I had hoped for. He earned his engineering degree, landed a good job, and seemed destined for the kind of steady, principled life his father would have been proud of. Then he met Stephanie. I'll never forget the first time Marcus brought her home. She was 25, undeniably beautiful, and had a way of making everything about herself within minutes of walking through the door. She came from a family that had struggled financially, which initially made me sympathetic. But as the months went by, I began to notice things that made my stomach turn. The way she'd calculate the value of items in our home with her eyes, how she'd steer conversations toward money and possessions, the designer handbag she somehow afforded on her part-time retail salary. After they married 6 months ago in a wedding that cost more than my first car, Stephanie quit her job entirely. She claimed Marcus made enough to support them both, but I watched my son's stress levels climb as bills piled up. She had expensive tastes and no intention of adjusting them to match their actual income. Worse, she began making subtle comments about our old house, suggesting I was rattling around in too much space, that I should consider selling Robert's collection of old junk and moving somewhere more appropriate for a woman my age. The day I decided to change the basement locks, Stephanie had cornered me in my own kitchen, explaining how much easier my life would be in a senior living community. She painted it as concern for my well-being, but I saw the calculation in her eyes as she glanced toward the basement door. That's when I knew Robert's intuition about protecting what matters most had been absolutely right. The real Stephanie emerged gradually, like a photograph developing in slow motion. At first, I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. Maybe her focus on material things came from growing up without them. Maybe her suggestions about downsizing came from genuine concern. But by the 3rd month of their marriage, her mask had slipped completely. It started at a family dinner I'd hosted to celebrate Marcus's promotion. I'd made Robert's favorite pot roast, set the table with our good china, and looked forward to an evening celebrating my son's success. Instead, Stephanie spent the entire meal cataloging everything in the dining room, making comments about how certain pieces would look in their apartment, how others were probably worth more than I realized. You know, Leslie, she said, cutting into her roast with surgical precision, this house is really too much for one person. Have you thought about what you'll do when you can't manage the stairs anymore? Marcus worries about you here all alone. I glanced at my son, expecting him to correct her presumptuous statement, but Marcus just shifted uncomfortably in his chair. That's when I realized she'd been working on him for months, planting seeds of doubt about my independence and capability. I managed just fine, I replied calmly, but she wasn't finished. Of course you do now, but planning ahead is so important. There are some lovely retirement communities nearby. Much safer, and you'd have people around. Plus, this place must be worth quite a bit. You and Robert invested well. The way she said it made my blood run cold. She wasn't concerned about my future. She was calculating her own. 2 weeks later, I came home from grocery shopping to find Stephanie in Robert's office upstairs, going through his filing cabinet. She startled when she heard me come in, quickly closing the drawer and standing up with an innocent smile. Oh, Leslie, I was just trying to help organize some of these papers. There's so much here, and I thought maybe some of it could be thrown away. Marcus mentioned, you've been meaning to go through Robert's things. Marcus had said no such thing. In fact, I'd been very clear that I would handle Robert's personal effects in my own time and my own way. But now she was claiming he'd asked her to help, putting me in the position of seeming ungrateful if I objected. I appreciate the thought, I said carefully, but I prefer to handle Robert's papers myself. Her smile faltered for just a moment. Of course, I just thought I could help since I have more time now that I'm not working. After she left, I checked the filing cabinet. She'd been through everything: financial records, insurance documents, even Robert's business correspondence with clients. I asked the neighbors later and learned she'd been chatting with them about Robert's antique business, asking innocent-sounding questions about how successful he'd been and whether he'd left behind valuable inventory. The final straw came when Marcus approached me about money for the first time in his adult life. He'd always been responsible, never asked for help, took pride in making his own way. But suddenly he needed $15,000 for Stephanie's dream ring to replace the modest engagement ring he'd originally given her. She's been so patient about it, he explained, looking embarrassed but determined. And with my promotion, we can afford to pay you back over time. She just deserves something special, Mom, something that shows how much I love her. I could see Stephanie's manipulation in every word he spoke. She'd convinced him that his love wasn't adequate without expensive proof that she was somehow sacrificing by wearing a ring that had cost him 2 months' salary when he'd proposed. Marcus, I said gently, when your father proposed to me, the ring cost $50. I wore it for 30 years and loved it every single day because it represented his commitment, not his bank account. This is different, Mom. Stephanie's different. She's been through a lot, and I want to give her security. That night, I installed the new digital lock on the basement door. When Stephanie discovered it the next morning, she didn't even try to hide her fury. What is this supposed to mean? She demanded, standing at the top of the basement stairs with her hands on her hips. It means some things aren't for sale, I replied quietly, and some places remain sacred. The 3 months that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare, with Stephanie wielding guilt and manipulation like precision weapons. She worked on Marcus, systematically convincing him that his mother was becoming paranoid and unreasonable. According to her narrative, I was a lonely widow clinging to the past, hoarding meaningless objects, while my only son struggled financially. Marcus began repeating her talking points verbatim. I was being paranoid about the basement. I was emotionally attached to junk. I needed to face reality about downsizing. The worst part was watching my son, who had been raised to think independently and question assumptions, become an echo chamber for his wife's agenda. Stephanie escalated her campaign by involving outsiders. She started spreading concerns about my mental state among the neighbors, suggesting I was becoming isolated and eccentric. She painted herself as the caring daughter-in-law trying to help a stubborn older woman see reason. Several neighbors mentioned her conversations to me, not realizing they were being used as pawns in her larger game. The real shock came when I returned from a doctor's appointment to find a real estate agent in my living room. He was measuring windows and taking photographs while Stephanie guided him through the house, pointing out original hardwood floors and architectural details that would appeal to buyers. "What is going on here?" I demanded. Stephanie burst into tears, immediately a skill she'd perfected over the months I'd known her. "Leslie, please don't be angry. I just wanted to get an idea of what the house might be worth. Not to sell it, just to know. Marcus is so worried about your future, about what will happen when you need care. We thought if we had information, we could help you plan better." The real estate agent looked mortified, clearly realizing he'd been brought into a family situation under false pretenses. He apologized and left quickly, but the damage was done. She'd crossed the line from manipulation into action. That evening, Marcus came to the house alone to apologize, but he still defended her intentions. "She's just trying to help, Mom. She worries about you here by yourself. We both do. Did you ask her to call a real estate agent?" He hesitated. "We discussed getting information, just in case." "In case of what?" "In case you decide you want to move somewhere safer, smaller, more manageable." I realized then that she'd convinced him I would inevitably become incapable of living independently, and that her involvement was not just helpful but necessary. She'd positioned herself as the solution to problems that didn't exist. The situation reached a breaking point when I caught Marcus trying to pick the basement lock with a set of tools he'd borrowed from work. Finding my own son crouched at my basement door, violating the one boundary I'd maintained, broke something inside me. "What are you doing?" I asked, though the answer was obvious. He stood up, embarrassed but defiant. "Mom, this is ridiculous. It's just a basement. Stephanie is pregnant and we need money for medical bills. You're sitting on Dad's life insurance money, while your pregnant daughter-in-law worries about doctor visits." The pregnancy announcement hit me like a physical blow, but something in his delivery made me suspicious. "When is she due?" "We just found out. It's early. Which doctor is she seeing?" His answers were vague, rehearsed sounding. Later, when I privately asked Stephanie about her pregnancy symptoms and doctor appointments, her responses contradicted his entirely. I realized they'd coordinated a lie to manipulate me into giving them money, using the promise of a grandchild as emotional blackmail. My friend Patricia confirmed my suspicions when she pulled me aside at the grocery store. She'd overheard Marcus and Stephanie meeting with a lawyer at the coffee shop, discussing strategies for proving a parent's incompetence and gaining power of attorney. The conversation had made Patricia uncomfortable enough that she'd stayed to listen, pretending to read her newspaper. "They were talking about documenting your erratic behavior," Patricia whispered. The lawyer mentioned how isolation and paranoia in older adults could support a case for intervention. I drove home that day, with my hands shaking, finally understanding the full scope of their plan. They weren't just after Robert's money. They were building a case to take control of my entire life. That night, I set up a small recording device in the kitchen and invited Stephanie over for tea. Within 20 minutes, she'd admitted the pregnancy was fabricated and outlined her frustration with my refusal to be reasonable about my financial resources. "You're being selfish, Leslie," she said, thinking she was confiding in a woman who had no other options. "Marcus deserves his inheritance now when it can actually help him build a future. What are you going to do with all that money? Take it to the grave." I had everything I needed. The next morning, I told Marcus and Stephanie I was taking a trip to visit my sister Margaret in Arizona. Stephanie's eyes lit up with barely concealed excitement, while Marcus seemed relieved that I'd be out of their way for a while. They had no idea I was setting the trap that would expose the true depth of their betrayal. Preparing to leave for Arizona felt like preparing for battle. I'd lived in that house for 30 years, built a life there with Robert, and created a sanctuary that held everything precious to us. Walking away, even temporarily, meant trusting that my preparations would be enough to protect what mattered most. I'd installed hidden cameras throughout the house weeks earlier, small devices that connected to my phone and would alert me to any activity. The basement door had motion sensors that would notify me immediately if anyone approached it. I'd also arranged with my security company to monitor unusual activity and respond accordingly. Margaret understood the plan completely. She'd never liked Stephanie from the first meeting, calling her a gold digger with the predatory instincts of a shark. Having raised 4 children and buried one husband herself, Margaret had developed sharp instincts about people's true motivations. "You're doing the right thing," she assured me as we sat on her porch the first evening. "Sometimes the only way to save someone from themselves is to let them face the full consequences of their choices." The first 2 days passed quietly. Marcus called each evening to check on me, his conversations, normal and loving. He asked about Margaret, shared details about work, told me he missed me. For brief moments, I wondered if I was wrong about his involvement, if maybe Stephanie was manipulating him without his full knowledge. That illusion shattered on the third day, when my phone buzzed with camera alerts. The footage showed Marcus and Stephanie standing at the basement door, with Stephanie directing him to examine the lock mechanism. She'd brought a toolbox and several devices I didn't recognize clearly, having researched methods for bypassing electronic locks. Day 4 brought more systematic attempts. They'd hired a locksmith, but he refused the job after learning they couldn't prove the house was theirs. The camera captured Stephanie's rage when the locksmith left, screaming at Marcus about his uselessness and demanding he find another way. By day 5, Stephanie had moved beyond subtlety entirely. She posted photos on social media showing expensive furniture she'd ordered for their apartment, tagged with captions about new beginnings and upgrading their space. She was spending money they didn't have, confident that access to my basement would solve their financial problems. Margaret watched my face as I showed her the posts. "She's not even trying to hide it anymore. She thinks she's already won," I replied. "She believes Marcus and I will give her whatever she wants rather than lose each other. Will you?" I thought about Robert, about the values he tried to instill in Marcus, about the difference between enabling someone and truly helping them grow. No. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Day 6 brought the call I'd been expecting, but its intensity still shocked me. My phone rang at 2 in the morning, Arizona time, Marcus's name flashing on the screen. When I answered, his voice was pure panic. "Mom, thank God you answered. We need that money now. Stephanie's in the hospital." The crisis call came exactly as I'd anticipated, but hearing my son's voice cracked with desperation still pierced my heart. Every maternal instinct screamed at me to help, to fix whatever was wrong, to protect the child I'd raised and loved unconditionally. But I forced myself to listen carefully to his words, not just his emotion. "What happened to Stephanie?" I asked, keeping my voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through me. "Car accident. She's hurt bad, Mom. They need to do emergency surgery, but our insurance won't cover everything. The surgeon wants 50,000 upfront, or they won't operate." The story had holes immediately. Emergency rooms don't refuse treatment based on insurance status. Surgeons don't demand cash upfront for life-saving procedures. But Marcus was speaking so fast, his panic so convincing, that I could see how someone wanting to believe him would override logic. "Which hospital?" I asked. "St. Mary's." "Mom, please, I need the basement code. I know Dad left money there for emergencies. This is an emergency." "Marcus, slow down. When did this happen?" 2 hours ago. I've been here the whole time. They just told me about the surgery." "What kind of surgery?" His answer was vague medical terms strung together without real understanding. "Internal bleeding, possible organ damage, critical condition." When I asked specific questions about her injuries or which doctor I should speak with, his responses became increasingly agitated. Mom, there's no time for details. Just give me the code. Please. I need to call the hospital and speak with someone myself. No, his voice cracked. You can't. I mean, visiting hours are over. They won't tell you anything anyway. That's when I knew for certain he was lying. Marcus put Stephanie on the phone. The silence stretched long enough for me to count my heartbeats. When he spoke again, his voice had changed completely. She can't talk. She's unconscious. Then put a nurse on the phone, or transfer me to the nurse's station. Another pause. Then suddenly his whole story crumbled. Okay, fine. She's not in the hospital. But Mom, we're in serious trouble. Stephanie owes money to some dangerous people. They came to our apartment tonight and gave us 48 hours to pay, or they'll hurt her. They'll hurt both of us. The truth was somehow worse than the lie. My son hadn't just been manipulated by his wife. He'd been an active participant in deceiving me, willing to fabricate a medical emergency to steal from his own mother. How much money does she owe? 60,000. She has a gambling problem. I didn't know how bad it was until tonight. Mom, these aren't normal people. They don't make empty threats. An hour later, he called again, his voice broken and desperate. Mom, I know I lied. I know I messed up. But I'm scared. Really scared. These guys aren't kidding around. Where did this gambling happen? Online mostly. Some casino trips. She said she was winning. She showed me screenshots of big wins, but apparently she was losing way more than she was telling me. Marcus, why didn't you come to me when you first realized there was a problem? She made me promise not to. She said she could handle it, that she just needed time to win it back. I thought I could protect her. The third call came just as I was beginning to feel sympathy for my son's situation. But this time it was Stephanie who grabbed the phone, her voice shrill with rage and desperation. You selfish old woman! Your son is in danger because of your paranoia about some stupid basement. We could die tonight because you care more about moldy old furniture than your own family. Her mask had dropped completely. There was no manipulation now, no fake tears or calculated sweetness. Just raw, ugly entitlement and fury that I wasn't complying with her demands. Stephanie put Marcus back on the phone. No, you listen to me. We know there's money down there, lots of money. You're sitting on hundreds of thousands of dollars while people threaten to kill us. What kind of monster does that? The kind who recognizes manipulation when she sees it. This isn't manipulation. This is life or death. Then call the police. We can't call the police. These people don't work that way. I heard Marcus in the background trying to get the phone back, but Stephanie wasn't finished. When you're dead, we'll get everything anyway. All you're doing is making sure your son suffers first. We'll take that house, that basement, everything. And I'll make sure Marcus knows you chose money over his life. The line went dead. I sat in Margaret's guest room holding the phone and finally understanding the full scope of what I was dealing with. Stephanie wasn't just greedy. She was genuinely dangerous, willing to destroy my son's relationship with his family. To get what she wanted. I turned my phone off and began preparing for the final phase of the confrontation. Whatever happened next, Marcus would have to choose between his wife's destructive influence and the values his father and I had tried to teach him. The test I designed was about to reveal which choice he would make. The decision to cut my trip short and return home early was both strategic and emotional. I couldn't stand the distance anymore, knowing my son was trapped in a situation that was spiraling beyond his control. But more importantly, I realized that this confrontation needed to happen face to face in the house where Robert and I had raised Marcus, surrounded by the memories and values that had once mattered to him. The 8-hour drive from Phoenix to home gave me time to prepare mentally for what I might find. I'd been monitoring the security cameras from Arizona, watching as Stephanie's attempts to access the basement became increasingly destructive. What I saw when I pulled into my driveway still shocked me. My front door was intact, but the basement door had been attacked with what looked like a crowbar. Deep gouges scarred the wood, around the lock mechanism, and someone had drilled multiple holes in an attempt to bypass the electronic system. Scratch marks on the walls showed where she tried to pry at the doorframe itself. The damage looked like the work of someone completely unhinged. I called the police immediately. Officer Rodriguez arrived within 15 minutes and documented everything with photos and detailed notes. The security footage I showed him clearly indicated attempted burglary, regardless of Stephanie's relationship to the family. "Ma'am, this is pretty serious damage," he said, examining the basement door. Whoever did this was determined and wasn't trying to hide their activity. "My daughter-in-law believes there's money in the basement. She's been pressuring my son to get access. Do you want to press charges?" Before I could answer, Marcus's car pulled into the driveway. Both he and Stephanie got out, clearly not expecting to find police cars in front of the house. Stephanie immediately went on the attack, marching toward us, with her hand pointing accusingly at me. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This woman has locked us out of our own home. My husband and I live here, and she's having some kind of mental breakdown. She's refusing to let us access our belongings." Officer Rodriguez looked at his notes. "Ma'am, the homeowner is Leslie Patterson. Are you listed on the deed?" "Well, no, but Marcus is her son. This is his childhood home. That doesn't give you legal right to break down doors and cause property damage." Marcus stepped forward, looking exhausted and defeated. "Officer, I can explain." But Stephanie cut him off. "She's hoarding money in that basement while creditors threaten our lives. She's mentally unstable and needs intervention." "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to calm down," Officer Rodriguez said firmly. "Breaking and entering is a crime regardless of family relationships." That's when I played the recording from my phone, the conversation where Stephanie had admitted fabricating the pregnancy and outlined her real motivations for wanting access to Robert's money. Her voice filled the air with ugly accusations about my selfishness and her determination to take everything when I died. Marcus's face went white as he heard his wife's true feelings about his mother, her casual dismissal of the values he'd been raised with, and her cold calculation about his inheritance. For the first time since he'd married her, he was hearing Stephanie without the filter of his own desperate desire to make their marriage work. "Stephanie," he said quietly, "you told me you were just worried about Mom being alone. You said you wanted to help her plan for the future." "I was protecting you," she snapped. "She was never going to give us anything willingly. You're too weak to stand up to her." The word weak hung in the air like a slap. I watched my son's face as he realized how his wife really saw him, how she'd been manipulating his love for her to turn him against the woman who'd raised him. Officer Rodriguez arrested Stephanie for property damage and attempted burglary. As they put her in the patrol car, she made one final attempt to manipulate the situation. "Marcus, don't let her do this to us. I'm pregnant. You can't let them arrest your pregnant wife." I waited for my son's response, knowing this moment would define the rest of our relationship. Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then turned to the officer. "She's not pregnant. She lied about that to try to get money from my mother." The 6 months that followed Stephanie's arrest were among the most difficult and rewarding of my life. Watching my son rebuild his sense of self after months of psychological manipulation was like watching someone recover from a serious illness. The Marcus who moved back into his childhood room to help repair the house damage was not the same man who had tried to pick my basement lock months earlier. The divorce proceedings revealed the full extent of Stephanie's deception. Her gambling debts were real, but they totaled $30,000, not 60. The dangerous creditors were mostly online betting sites and credit card companies, not the violent criminals she'd described. She'd inflated every aspect of their financial crisis to create urgency and panic. Marcus's therapist helped him understand how gradually the manipulation had occurred. Stephanie had isolated him from friends who questioned her behavior, undermined his confidence in his own judgment, and created an us against the world mentality that made him see his mother's concern as opposition rather than love. I thought I was protecting her, he told me one evening as we worked together to repair the basement door. She convinced me that you didn't understand her, that your questions came from prejudice rather than genuine concern. She was very skilled at what she did, I replied, sanding down the gouged wood. Manipulation that's sophisticated doesn't happen overnight. The restraining order kept Stephanie away from both of us, though she made several attempts to contact Marcus through mutual friends and social media. Each attempt followed the same pattern: threats followed by tearful apologies, followed by promises to change. Marcus learned to recognize the cycle and stopped responding entirely. Gradually, I began sharing the basement's secrets with my son, not all at once, and not because he pressured me, but because I could see he was ready to understand why some things are worth protecting. The first time I opened Robert's safe and showed Marcus the life insurance money, he was quiet for a long time. Dad really did think ahead, he said finally. He understood that security isn't about having everything you want right now. It's about having resources when you truly need them. I taught Marcus to use some of Robert's restoration tools, sharing techniques his father had never had the chance to pass down. We worked on refinishing a chest of drawers together, and I watched my son's patience and attention to detail return as he connected with the craftsmanship values his father had embodied. The neighborhood gossip eventually died down. The people who had been influenced by Stephanie's version of events saw the truth for themselves as Marcus and I rebuilt our relationship. More importantly, Marcus developed the confidence to address the lies directly when they came up. My wife was going through some serious problems, he told Patricia one day at the grocery store. My mother was trying to protect all of us, including Stephanie. I just couldn't see it at the time. By month 6, Marcus had found a new apartment and a better job. He'd developed a debt repayment plan that would have him financially stable within 2 years. Most importantly, he'd learned to trust his own instincts again, rather than looking to a romantic partner to define his reality. The basement remained special, but it was no longer a secret between us. Marcus understood that Robert's tools, his wood collection, and yes, the emergency fund represented more than monetary value. They represented the patience, planning, and principle that build real security. On the anniversary of his father's death, Marcus and I sat in the basement workshop together, surrounded by Robert's carefully organized tools and half-finished projects. "I'm sorry I disappointed him," Marcus said quietly. "You didn't disappoint him. You learned from a difficult experience and became stronger." That's exactly what he would have wanted. We sat in comfortable silence, two people who had learned that love sometimes requires difficult boundaries, that protection can look like cruelty from the outside, and that the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to grow from their own mistakes. The basement still holds its secrets, but now they're shared with someone who understands their true value isn't monetary. It's the knowledge that some things are worth protecting, some people are worth waiting for, and some lessons can only be learned through the kind of pain that leads to wisdom. Sometimes the greatest love requires the hardest boundaries. I learned that from protecting what my husband left behind. Marcus learned it from nearly losing everything that mattered. And now we both understand that true security comes not from getting everything you want, but from knowing the difference between what you need and what you think you deserve. The locked door that once divided us has become the foundation for a stronger relationship, built on honesty, respect, and the understanding that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's just another form of enabling, and we've both learned where that path leads. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love, even when they couldn't see your intentions were good? Share your story in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story resonated with your own experiences with family boundaries and difficult relationships. Subscribe for more real stories about navigating family challenges and protecting what matters most. And please share this video with someone who might need to hear that sometimes the hardest decisions are the most loving ones. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that true strength sometimes looks like saying no to the people we love most. Until next time, protect your boundaries and trust your instincts.